Good morning. I'm Bruce Holland. I'm the Executive Director of the Arkansas Natural Resources Commission, which is a division of the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. And I've been asked this morning to discuss a little bit about the levee task force and some of the governor's funding that $10 million he set aside for use to shore up the levees as a result of the 2019 flood. Our agency was included in the governor's task force, and I was asked to co-chair the subcommittee dealing with funding for the levees. So there's of course the difference between the governor's grant money and the task force. The task force was tasked with looking into the future and saying, what do we need to do moving forward to make sure that our levees are raised up and built up to better standards, because even though there was a lot of damage from the flood in 19, the levees held for the most part. So what do we need to do to shore them up? We noticed there were a lot of timber growing on the levees and just a lot of disrepair. A lot of those levees needed maintenance and operations schedules. So we can loan levee districts money through the Natural Resources Commission if they can repay them. And so what we set forth trying to do was to figure out what is the best way to do that. And so we can't just loan someone money without a way to repay it. So what do we need them to do? First of all, they need to make sure that the levee board is functioning. You know, a lot of districts had a levee board that met once a year, and maybe some of the members had not been attending those meetings. So to find a way to get them to complete those boards. We want the local folks to do their thing, you know, and the citizens that are protected by those levees should demand that, you know. So and some of the issues that have come up with that is there are certain districts where they're predominantly farmland, and sometimes that property is owned by people out of state. And so who should be sitting on those levee boards? And there was some discussion then about could the person who is operating that land or leasing that land be a member of that levee board? And I think that's something that the locals should decide. If there's a landowner in there that owns, you know, a large percentage, 10–20% of the property that's protected by the levee, well, they should probably have a voice on that board in some way. So whether that's through a proxy or someone who's leasing that property, I think that should be considered. We talked about that quite a bit, and the reporting and where's the hammer, what happens if someone's not doing that. And it was recommended that they send 2 reports in annually and let the county judges and the county emergency management operators sit down with those levee districts once a year and go through what's going on with that district so they can identify the weaknesses in the system. Last year when the flood came through, if the governor said, okay, Department of Emergency Management, where are our weaknesses? Who said, well, Governor, we don't know. We would like to get that up to a system that says we know exactly where those systems are that are under repair or there might be weak. So those reports could be given to us here at ANRC so that we know what's going on with respect to how they're spending their money, what funding needs they might have, and the Department of Emergency Management so that they could have a quick access to, okay, there's a flood coming down the White River, the Arkansas River, whatever the case may be. In this one, it was Arkansas River. Okay, so where are the dangers? Okay, Governor, there's a gate out of commission in Conway County, or there's still under repair in Dardanelle. So those are where we need to send resources if we need to shore something up. So that kind of reporting, and I think once that the county judges understand where their weaknesses are, I think they could probably push those districts or do what needed to be done. And Another thing that came out of the discussions in the task force were that a lot of the acreage that should have been in the assessment for the districts had fallen out of those assessments. For instance, somebody might have sold half of an 80-acre parcel and 40 acres was then left off of the new tax records, and so it wasn't being assessed. There was one instance where they asked for someone to come in and look at those assessments, and they found that about 2/3 of them had dropped off the books, and so that raised their assessment by about 200% when they looked into that. So that's another thing that needs to be looked at when we consider giving a loan. That's a big question, and the task force opinion was it should be left up to the locals what they need to raise those assessments to. The state shouldn't dictate what that should be, but they shouldn't say what it couldn't be either. If there's a local district out there somewhere and they say, okay, we're going to assess ourselves, pick a number, $20 an acre for the next 10 years so that we can do the repairs needed, and then we're going to drop it back down to $4 an acre, whatever that is. Well, that should be allowed, and if there's anything impeding that, then that should be considered too when the legislature meets. And third is, do they have an operation and maintenance schedule? What is the minimum they need to be doing to properly maintain that levee? Fix the gates, keep it mowed, keep the timber off of it, and that sort of thing. So once we go through that checklist and see what they're capable of, then we can look at what we can loan. And so if there's a difference there, that was one of the recommendations of the task force that I think the governor and the legislature will be looking at next session is, should there be a fund set up to support that difference? So if someone comes and they need $1 million to get their levee back up into the RIP program, the Corps' RIP program, and say they have the ability to pay a $700,000 loan, well, where can we get that other $300,000 from? And so if they get all the other stuff in place, the legislature and the task force, or the task force recommended there might be a fund set up, and so that's something that the governor and legislature, I'm sure, will address in the next legislative session. It's a core program through which if they're certified to the RIP program, then if a flood comes through and it washes out part of the levee system, well, then the Corps will come in and pay up to 80% of that. So it's kind of an insurance policy for that levee district. So say that we loaned that imaginary levee district $1 million, and they were building their levee back up, and a flood came through the next year and did $1 million worth of damage to it. Well, they obviously couldn't afford to come back in and ask for another $1 million when they can't support that loan. So that's where it's an insurance policy that the Corps would come in, and we would depend on them to fix it back up at least 80%. So that's why we set that as the standard. If you're going to be organized and you're going to ask for a loan, you should be making progress towards getting in that RIP program. And when we talk about the work that the task force did, we met a lot. Between a year ago, actually a year ago this week, when that levee task force was formed, up until December, and the involvement in that task force, all of the stakeholders, everyone was there. We talked through a lot of tough things, and we came out with a really good set of recommendations, I think. And it's a credit to the governor for selecting the folks that he did select to join that group, and the hard work. Chairman Jamie Cook did a great job of putting the right people on the right committees, and the discussions were always good. We all learned a lot. We all looked at each other's perspectives, and we came together with some really solid recommendations for the legislature and the governor to consider. We stand ready here at Natural Resources to work with the governor's office and with the legislature to get something that everybody can work with.